Do you think that Western civilization is dead?
I it, I think it really has come to an end.
That means
Maybe it can
dead,
be. Yeah, yeah.
right?
I think so. I don't say that lightly. There are a lot of people who say, "Oh, it was always phony and it was nothing but but you know, subjugation and slavery and uh, but there were many great things that this Western civilization achieved. I'm a great admirer of those achievements, and I find it sad, that it has reached the point that it has. It's just, I look at England and France, and again, it's not that there weren't crimes associated with in the past with these governments. There were great crimes, but there were also just marvelous achievements. Just there was a reason that the world, looked up to Europe and admired it greatly. But I think it's gone. It has been replaced by these idiots and these technocrats, um, and the cultures have been hollowed out. Maybe I just hope that something will replace it, and but it may take a long time. We may be decades or even centuries of dark ages ahead of us. I don't know.
Yeah, I think many people don't ask themselves that question. But I think there's kind of a feeling deep down inside them that they realize there's something wrong. And if Western civilization is dead, then I feel like you can't get people to fight a war for Western civilization because they're like, what am I fighting for? What are
Right.
my values anymore? What for these guys that are really unpopular that have seen my country get worse year after year under their rule, and now they're telling me to go fight
Yeah.
for what? This
Yeah.
dump I'm living in? Get out of here, right?
Yeah. Right. Or even if it isn't a dump, it's just like it's still, even if, let's say, living standards have fallen, and they in general are falling in places like Germany, they're still a lot higher than they are in the rest of the world. But yeah, it's just like they don't believe in it. Nobody's willing to fight and die for this, or very few people. And that's what the polls show. I mean, it's quite stark. It's a very, very small minorities in these countries are saying, yeah, even if we were invaded, I'm not willing to fight. You have majorities saying that. That
Yeah,
you
I
wouldn't
mean,
have found that in the past, but it
right.
does tell you something. It does tell you that they think, okay, yeah, I can have a comfortable life. Maybe I just want to hang on to that, but this is not something that really means a whole lot to me. Germany doesn't mean a whole lot. Europe doesn't. France doesn't. It's just a place where I can consume and exist.
Yeah, I guess that's kind of a byproduct of pushing sort of multiculturalism and diversity for so long. You start to lose your own identity in some of these European countries, right? It's
I
like,
think
well,
that's
we're
true.
all the same, right? We're all
Right.
European. Who cares? What does it mean to be French? What does it mean to be
Right.
German? Um, so okay, I have a couple questions. I'll start with this one. So ironically, I feel like we said Western civilization is dead, and we've been kind of the elite sometimes try to frame it maybe in this idea of this battle between Western civilization or the Asian horrors, whatever. Yeah,
Or
uh,
authoritarianism. Yeah.
yeah, right. Frame it in this sense, but ironically, I feel like Russia might actually kind of end up being the bastion of Western civilization to some extent because it didn't go the route of the rest of the West, of the collective West. So it has preserved more of its traditional sense. They have a Russian identity. They have nationalism and patriotism that doesn't exist in much of the collective West. They have preserved their ethnic makeup has been more or less consistent, even though it's very ethnically diverse. It has a majority a Caucasian majority that's kind of stayed this more or less the same. I assume. I'm sure there's been some fluctuations, but do you agree that in that sense that maybe we'll
Yeah.
start to people will look at Europe and be like, well, the only few places that are actually like the civilization that survived was actually the Russian one, and that is now the new Western civilization,
Yeah.
and we have something new that's in Europe and the United States that needs to. Do we call it a civilization? It's a work in progress. I mean, what is it?
Yeah. Yeah. Well, there are a lot of people who argue that, and I think that they have, um, and that their arguments should not be dismissed. It's just, it's, You do have people actually moving to Russia because for that reason, they feel like this is the part of European civilization or Christendom that still exists. And they see the future there. And the Russians themselves, it's interesting, like among the leadership in particular, they say that they really love Europe, but that, like we're just saying, but the Europe that they loved doesn't exist anymore. It was a Europe of even like 25 years ago or something. Europe was still Europe, but they feel like it has ceased to be Europe. It has undergone a fundamental change. So this is sort of what we were talking about, but you do hear that kind of this discourse, that it does exist within the elites and beyond the elites, throughout Russia. I guess I do see the chance. I just would say that Russia has a long ways to go. It has made great progress since the 90s, and it is a better place to live all around. I think culturally stronger, safer, more prosperous. It's on the right track, but it still has a long ways to go. And again, I hear a lot about what's going on in Russia from your sister. And clearly she's happy there. That's where she wants to stay. That's where she wants to settle down. And she does believe in the future of Russia. But she says there are a lot of problems. They too deal with high divorce rates and that kind of thing. It's not like it is, they do have it's nominally a Christian country, and there is a large minority of practicing, Orthodox Christians there. But it's a long ways from really being, maybe the civilization that it seeks to be. It does seem to be on that path, but it has a ways to go. So I'm kind of reluctant. I know some people will say that this is a battle between, like, almost between Christendom and atheism, or nihilism probably is a better term to use. And I'm reluctant to say that because I know that it almost seems to I think you have to be a little bit more realistic about where Russia is now. Again, I see the potential for Russia. It is on that path. I don't know that it really has recovered the old Europe, the good parts of Europe, but I think it's on that path, and I think that maybe it's certainly, I think, culturally much healthier than Europe is right now. People do believe in it. They do have faith in their futures. There is a different kind of spirit. There's, one thing that I was struck, this is kind of a minor point, but I think it illustrates the greater reality. I was struck by how many new statues there were in Israel. Not Israel, I'm sorry, Russia. It's just that they are putting up new statues, but to heroes of the past. It's like they continue to celebrate their past. They believe in, where they are, and they include the Soviet Union in that. A lot of the Soviet monuments remain. And I think that was actually wise. That was a shared experience. Not everything about the Soviet Union was bad by a long shot. This was all something. There's something this is all part of who they are, and they don't forget it. And so these new statues go up. And that, I think, shows, I guess, the people that are alive who believe in themselves and believe that they have a future. But in contrast, you see the statues falling down, or being torn down in places like the U.S. and in Europe. And if they're replaced by anything, it's like by maybe a giant clothespin or something. It's not something that really shows a sense of identity. So, yeah, I think there's a lot to that.
Well, what do you think will come out of the West if Western civilization is dead? Does that mean we create a new civilization? We have to become part of another civilization? We absorb, or what does this mean? Do we become the corrupt pedophile civilization? It's like,
yeah. That question is too big for me. I just don't know. I don't think anybody can know. I think it is clear that Western civilization has sort of come to the end of a long, very overall, you have to say, successful run with some horrors in the middle, but there's, I think it has come to an end. It's just when you look at Ursula von der Leyen, Kaja Kallas, and Keir Starmer, and Chancellor Merz. You say this is, there's no future in these kind of people. They're not going to lead Europe into a glorious future. They're just overseeing the end of Europe.
What killed it? Well, actually, let me answer that. I kind of feel like I know what killed it, and in some sense, it's just when you say that Western civilization is dead, I'm not feeling much sadness or remorse, even though I'm a product of it. Maybe I should, but maybe it's because I just am disgusted with what has become. My concept of Western civilization has been tainted, and in that sense, it's killed it, that people don't care anymore. Maybe it's the apathy that killed it. I don't know if I answered it. I don't like that answer, actually. Give me a better answer.
Again, maybe this question's too big for me. I don't know what killed it, but I have felt real sadness. Maybe it's just because I was born a generation earlier. And I do, like, even in the case of, of course, I grew up, I was really fed, my imagination as a child was fed by European literature, especially British literature, but also by, like so many of the BBC shows, like back in the 1970s, there was still very much a Britain. And it was just, you could, it was these wonderful, silly people, who were very good at poking fun at themselves. But were very proper. Back then you could talk about a British gentleman. Now, there are a lot of people who think that that's still true. It just isn't, that Britain is gone.
There are a few left. There are a few.
Okay.
Right?
Yeah. But I do remember it. And as you began to see the fall, I think maybe with Tony Blair, I guess you can always go back farther, but in so many ways it began like the culture started to coarsen, and then began real attacks on the whole notion of Britishness. And they just sort of, like so many of these countries have it's almost like they have autoimmune disorders where their immune systems are attacking themselves. They're going after, so many of these things that made them unique. And it's just sad to see. I remember really feeling sadness when I saw that happening to Britain and to other European countries. But now maybe I'm kind of like you are, just like it's so horrible, just like it's better. It's just they die and get it over with. And then hopefully something that will follow will be better.
I do feel sad when I think about Europe. It's just different with America because it's always been more a diverse thing and a newer thing that it's able to kind of be more malleable in its identity, and I feel like it has in general. But with Europe, it's just a shame because we're talking about thousands of years of civilizations. Your ancestors were here for thousands of years, and they created this, and now it's all gone. It's like, I wouldn't say it's all gone, but it's on its way out. Like you said, it's dying, it's dead. So yeah, in that sense, it is sad. It's just one of those huge questions that I find myself asking, like, what will happen to Europe? And I guess nobody knows. It's just, we know that it's not going to be good.